is the other part of the 80-20 rule or the 80-20 principle. Now, all of you are familiar with the 80-20 principle. You've heard of it before, and you know what it states. It states that 80% of our results come from 20% of our inputs. This is also known as Pareto's principle. And just as a reminder here at the top of this episode, that this is a principle. This is not a theory. It is not an opinion. In other words, this is not something I'm presenting to you as an argument that you can agree or disagree with. This is real. It is reality. All right, this is how it works. 80% of your results in anything that you do is coming from 20% of the inputs. And you can apply this in the work world. You can apply this in the sales force. You can apply it to your happiness. You can apply it to your productivity. It applies across the board in all of these places. So since everyone's familiar with that, today I'm going to tell you about that final 20%, why and when it matters, and if it matters for you specifically in certain situations. There are times when it does matter, and there are times when it doesn't. Point number one, topic here today, again, is the other part of the 80-20 principle. Number one, once you have achieved the 80% of results with 20% of the inputs, that is often good enough for most people in most things. All right, so you need to know, what is the good enough spot? Dan Kennedy talks about this in one of his books. He talks about the good enough spot when it comes to things that he's trying to achieve or things that he's trying to get done. Many people talk about this. I'm just thinking of Dan Kennedy because the last person I was reading who said it was him. So I'm thinking of him because he happens to be fresh on my mind. But I talked about this in episode number 2177. When good enough is good enough. Most of you should understand that in most of the things that you do, good enough is good enough. Meaning you don't have to do everything to perfection, because doing things to perfection in every aspect of your life simply does not produce the return on investment that it is worth. The amount of time, effort, energy you had to put into doing something at a level 100, when doing it at a level 80 is good enough, you got to put in a whole lot more to get that last 20. Now, you understand? You want to get a level 100 result, meaning you got to go past the 80-20 rule and get that last 20. That's when you put in the remaining 80% of inputs. You understand the math here? So if it takes 20% of your input to get to 80% of the result, in order to get the last 20% of results, you got to put in 80% of input. That means 4 times the resources to get 1/4 of the results. In most aspects of your life, this is not necessary. You don't need to do this. When you're washing dishes, for example, 80% is good enough. And when I say 80%, I don't mean the dishes need to be 80% washed. What I mean is you don't have to do it to perfection the same way that you may be a perfectionist when it comes to doing your job or running your business, because doing your job and running your business makes a lot more difference in your life and your overall well-being and happiness and success than washing the dishes does. I'm going to make that assumption. If I'm wrong, then you can flip that around. But for most of you, that's pretty much how it goes. You need to know what areas of life does it matter that I put all the effort I have into this, even if it means a lot more time than I do everything else, in order to get a certain result, as opposed to which areas is it okay for me to give 20% of the input to get 80% of the result, and that's fine. All right, I'm satisfied with 80%. Understand that you cannot do everything at a 100% level. You do not have the resources to do so. The time, the attention, the energy, and the focus. You might have the money, but you don't have the time, attention, energy, and focus of what you need, even if you did have money. Now, if you have money, you can use other people, but you don't control their 80%. You don't control what their 20 is. You control what you want them to do. You can set the standards. But if you were doing things, I'm talking about the things that you do yourself, there's a certain amount of time required. There's energy, there's attention, and focus required. You can't give 100% to everything, because, again, you're going to run out of resources. And then you're not going to have any resources for the things that matter most. Remember what balance means, folks. It means everything adding up to 100 does not mean everything is equal. Everything is not equal. You have a career and you also do the laundry and you also wash dishes and you also got to make the bed. Those don't all get an equal amount of resources. Why? Because they don't all matter the same amount. Doesn't mean you can't do them all, but do they all matter the same amount? The answer is hell no, they don't. And you should be divvying out your resources accordingly based on what is worth what and what can produce a certain outcome versus what cannot. So for most people, 80% of the results and 20% of the input is good enough. So that last 20% requires 80% of your inputs. Again, many aspects of life, you won't need to do this. I'm going to talk about that more in the second point. But let's talk about where you might want to go to this extreme. So if you are a professional athlete, for example, getting to 80% of the result is probably not good enough, because you're competing against other people who are also just as just as skilled and talented and have just as much resources as you have. So you can't just get 80%. You need to get the 100. So when you're competing against people who are that good, you need to be as good as you can possibly be. So if you're a soccer player, for example, and you already developed 80% of the skill, and you only use 20% of your resources to do it, you must give up that last 80% of resources. You must input that to get to that last 20% to get to 100% level skill, because that's the only way you'll be able to compete with these other pro players. Swap out soccer player for what you do professionally. You should do the exact same thing. So whatever you're trying to do professionally, yes, you can get to about 80% of what you need with only 20% of input pretty quickly. But that last 20%, you need it for the thing you do professionally, because professional means doing something that's one's main paid occupation. So whatever that is for you, you need to realize, okay, I need to put the extra in just to get it out of this thing. You want to be the best at what you do in the world, the rewards are 100 times bigger than the inputs. This is why it matters. This is the gamble that you're taking. Gamble that you're taking is used. So let's put some numbers to this. So let's say there's a level 0 and a level 100 in terms of skill set at the thing you do professionally. All right, so there's a level 0, which is a complete bum, never did it. Level 100, which is the best there is in the field. You can get to a level 80, which means you're better than most of the people in the field by giving only 20% of your resources: time, money, attention, energy, focus. So let's just use time here. You work, if you could give 10 hours a week to something, you can give 2 hours and you're good to get to 80% of what's necessary. That's pretty good. Now, if you want to get to level 100, and I'm going to tell you why level 100 is worth it in a second, you got to give up another 8 hours of time in order to get there. And you're only getting 20 units of results, but you got to give 88 hours of time in order to get it. That seems like an unfair trade. Why would you even do that? Why not just stick to the 80-20? Well, the reason is, when you get to the top, if you get recognized as the best in your space at the thing that you do, the rewards you get for being the best, number one, at the very top, are worth 100 times more than whatever resources you had to put in order to get there. Challenge is, not everybody gets there. Now, you have to put in, you literally got to put in all your resources to get it. You got to go all in on this thing. You have to sell out in order to get to this level. And if you sell out and you actually do hit it, then the rewards are so big that it will dwarf whatever you had to put in order to get there. And now, again, this does not apply in every aspect of your life. There's probably, for each of you, one aspect of your life in which this equation makes sense. Not 3, not 12, not 7. One aspect of your life where it makes sense for you to put all your resources in, push all your chips into the middle of the table, and go for that top spot, because the ROI from being in the top spot is 100 times more than what you had to put in. The return on investment is times 100. All right, if I told you an investment you can make is guaranteed a 100 times return, how much would you invest in it? Well, you probably invest everything you had. All right, that's what I'm telling you. This is what happens when it comes to a certain thing that you do. And again, for each of you, there is one thing that fits this description, not 3, not 12, not 2, one. One thing that you have the potential for this to happen. Actually, maybe some of you might be super talented and there are 2, but for most of you, it's 1. You look at an athlete like Kobe Bryant. All right, Kobe Bryant, 20% of the inputs could get him to 80% of the results. He was so good, he was able to go from high school and get drafted to the NBA. But in order for him to become a legend, which Kobe Bryant, passed away now, is a legendary name that everybody knows. Kobe Bryant put in the final 80% of inputs that led to the 20% that got him from being in the NBA player to being a superstar in the NBA. There's a whole bunch of players in the NBA. There are 450, 500 players in the NBA, but how many superstars we got? You can count them on your hands. So just because you're there doesn't mean you're there. You get what I'm saying? There's a different level to it. There's levels to this shit. And those levels mean you got to be willing to sell out. And I think from the stories that we've heard, whether from Kobe or from others, I think we can agree, we've come to a consensus that Kobe Bryant did sell out for this goal of becoming a legendary player in the game of basketball. Now, there are other players who play basketball at the same level as Kobe, same league, same job, but they are not at legendary status. One reason being that maybe they just don't have the potential to even get there no matter how hard they try. And another reason is they haven't tried, or they haven't put in the effort to even try in the first place, so they don't actually know. And for the most part, it's usually the second thing. What I find, and I'm using sports here as an example, but sports is an outlier profession where not everybody even has the opportunity to play. Whereas the profession that most of you have who's listening to this, anyone theoretically could do it. Like basketball player, not anybody could do that no matter how hard you try. If you're 5'4", you ain't playing in the NBA. If you're female, you ain't playing in the NBA. So there's a certain people, you have to have certain genetic qualifications to even be in a job. So I'm using Kobe as an example here because all of you know who he is. But don't just default to sports on this one. I'm talking about the kind of place that you work. Pretty much anybody could do it if they wanted to do it. If they wanted to. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying if they wanted to, they could. Most people don't. All right, moving on to point number, actually, one more thing on point number one. This does not apply in every aspect of life. Again, for most of you, it's one thing. Some of you, if you're an exception, maybe two. Nobody more than two. Nobody's that talented. Point number two. Today's topic, once again, is the other part of the 80-20 principle. Number two. This is usually reserved for people working on their main task, their main life's task, or their main life's work, and or your full-time profession. So I just touched on all of this at the end of point number one. Here, you can afford to invest 80% of your resources in getting to the last 20% of results, because that last 20% can make a big difference. So you can afford to make this investment because you're all in on this thing that you're doing. So this is why, again, understand you don't have the resources to do this in everything, because you can't give another 80% of resources to every single thing you do. You would run out of time. And something, push got to come to shove. Something has to give. Remember, folks, balance equals everything. Balance means everything equaling up to 100. Doesn't mean everything is equal. Do you think Kobe Bryant put the same effort into dusting the furniture in his home that he put into honing his jump shot? Absolutely not. Did he put the same effort into organizing his linen closet as he did his defensive footwork? I would guess probably not. Why? Because what's the return on investment from being the best in the world at organizing a linen closet versus what's the return on investment from being the best in the world at making a jump shot? All right, I think we can agree there's a bigger ROI on the jump shot. So Kobe, therefore, smartly put more of his resources into the thing that can produce more of a result. So for you, swap out Kobe and his jump shot. What is the thing for you that if you put all your resources into that thing, it gives you the most potential, given where your life is right now, who you are today? What gives you the most potential for producing a high return on investment for you, given who you are? You need to know the answer to that question. And the answer to that question is the area in which you should go all in, and you should sell out, and you should put all your resources in, because it's worth it. So this is what I was explaining in the first point. So this is where you invest a lot into getting that extra 1 or 2% of return on the thing that you're doing. And that big investment to get such a small difference could be the difference between, for example, a silver medalist and a gold medalist in the Olympics. What do you think the difference is between one and the next? The difference between the person who wins gold and the person who wins silver is a very small difference. But the person who wins gold gets 100 times the reward of the person who wins silver. The difference between the two, and it might be 1% in performance, but the difference in rewards could be 100 times in rewards in terms of money, name, recognition, what happens in your career after that, all based on a small difference between the winner and the second place person. Between the runner-up and being the champion, small difference in skill, small difference in results, but a huge difference in rewards. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? So this is, again, why you have to be very selective about what is the area in which you're going to go for this, because if you start dissipating and diluting your resources amongst multiple things and spreading yourself out, well, you are putting yourself behind the 8 ball and at a disadvantage against people who are not making that mistake. They're saying, I'm going to go all in on this thing right here. You're trying to go all in on 3 things at the same time. Well, you'll never reach your full potential in any of them because you're trying to do too many things at once. More than one thing at a time is too many. Just to make sure you all understand that. More than one thing at a time is too many. When I'm talking about your focus, by the way. Human beings can't focus on more than one thing at a time. It's humanly impossible. So between being the name that everyone knows and being the name that almost nobody knows, that's the difference. Between putting all your resources in just to get that one last percentage point. Most of you are familiar with Bruce Jenner. Bruce goes by the name Caitlyn these days. Bruce is not Caitlyn. Bruce is a man walking around as a woman. But that's besides my point here. Bruce Jenner became Bruce Jenner because he won an Olympic gold medal, I believe it was back in the 70s, for the decathlon. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, he's also famous because he's the stepfather to the Kardashian women, and he's also biological father to a couple of the Jenner kids. My question, though, is Bruce Jenner, he initially became famous by winning the decathlon in the Olympics and gold medal. Who won the silver medal and the bronze medal that year at that same Olympiad that Bruce won his gold medal at? Can you answer the question without Googling or without ChatGPT? I would guess none of you can answer the question, but I'm going to ask ChatGPT right now for the answer to that question. So let's see what they said. Who were the silver and bronze medalists in the event that Bruce Jenner won his gold medal at in the Olympics? I'm asking ChatGPT right now. So their answer is Bruce Jenner, now Caitlin, still Bruce to me, won the gold medal in the men's decathlon at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. The silver winner name was Guido Kratschmer from West Germany, and the bronze medal winner was Nikolai Avilov from the Soviet Union. Now, my question to you listening, how many of you ever heard of Guido Kratschmer or Nikolai Avilov? And most of you, the answer is probably no, you have not heard of them unless you happen to know them personally or you happen to be a decathlete and you are a big historian of your sport. Now, why am I bringing this up? Bringing this up to let you know that Guido and Nikolai were the second and third best decathletes in the whole damn world in 1976. That's pretty damn high up. All the people who do the decathlon, they were the second and third best in the whole world. And the decathlon is often noted as the most daunting athletic event in all of the Olympics because you got to do 10 different events. That's why it's called a decathlon. You're doing 3 different things. I mean, not 3, 10 different things. And your score is an accumulation of all those things put together. These are the second and third best in the entire world, and nobody knows their name. But everybody knows Bruce Jenner. You see what I mean? This is what I mean by the outsized results that come when you're the person at the top. And sometimes there can only be one. Sometimes there can be multiple, but sometimes there can only be one. So this is the decision that you got to make to go all in. At the pro level where everyone's good and there are only a handful who are even qualified to compete, the difference between first place and second place is both small and huge at the same time. So small, and that difference between the winner and the loser is often a minuscule difference because they're both very good. So you ain't got to be that much better to be the number one person. But the difference in rewards for the winner versus the loser is huge based on what does the winner get? Everyone knows the winner. Everyone celebrates the winner. Everyone recognizes the winner. The winner gets all these cash and prizes, and the loser, second place person, what's also going to be called the loser, doesn't get any of that stuff. It's all or nothing. That's how it works. That's why it's worth it to put in the remaining 80% to get that small 20% of results. Think about, again, I brought up someone like Michael Jordan, for example. When Michael Jordan played his last 2 years for the Chicago Bulls, he played against the Utah Jazz both years in the NBA Finals, beat the Utah Jazz in the Finals both years, both times in 6 games. Now, the Utah Jazz were a very good team, very close to winning a championship. Had it not been for Michael Jordan, I bet had they played 2 different teams those 2 years, the years that the Bulls won, the first year, 97, it would have been the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals. And the second year, it was the Indiana Pacers. They would have played in the NBA Finals. I think the Utah Jazz would have won at least one of those finals series. They would have won one of them. They would have had a championship. But because they lost to the Chicago Bulls both years, as the second best team in the whole world, and Karl Malone maybe the second best player in the whole world, both of those seasons, think about the rewards that Michael Jordan got versus the rewards that Karl Malone got. Some of you don't even know who Karl Malone is, but everybody knows who Michael Jordan is. You understand? There's a big difference. And the difference between the two of them ain't that big, but the difference in rewards is that big. This is why you put that final 80% in. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is the other part of the 80-20 principle. Number 3, the mistake happens when we have already achieved 80% of the result, yet we keep working at giving inordinate amounts of resources to get a small amount of return in an area in which the return does not make much of a reward difference. This is the mistake you don't want to make. This is you putting the last 80% of your resources into getting better at washing the dishes when getting better at washing the dishes does not produce a difference in rewards. So you put all those resources in to get little to nothing back. This is a bad exchange. This is a bad investment. Everything you do in life is an investment. It's just a matter of if it's a good investment or a bad investment. Everything's an investment. You have a 10-minute conversation with a bum who's going nowhere and can't help you in any way. That's an investment. It's just a 10-minute investment that you can't get back. That's called a sunk cost. Whereas you took 10 minutes talking to somebody who is highly successful and they know a lot about an area in which you want to be successful, that's a great investment. Even if you had to pay for that 10 minutes, it's a great investment because of what you're going to get out of it. So everything's an investment, folks. You got to be smart about the investments that you make because you're making one every minute you're making an investment. You're making an investment by listening to me right now. The part I warned you about at the end of the first point is you don't want to put 80% of your resources into something to get the last 20% out when it doesn't matter. All right, for any human being, there's only one area of life in which it makes sense to follow this equation. Did you hear me? 1. Any area that's not that, do not use this at all. If you're a lawyer, it makes sense to put 80% of your efforts into getting that last 20% out of being the best possible attorney that you can be. If you care about being the best possible attorney you can be. There are some attorneys out there who are okay with just being 80% good and they're all right with that because maybe career is not their area of ambition. Maybe it's your family. So you actually give 20% to get 80% as a lawyer because you want to go 100% all in on your family and that's your priority. And that's okay. And by the way, you probably can't give 100% to your family and 100% to your career at the same time. I'm not saying you're going to neglect one or the other, but you probably can't do both at the same time all the time. And whoever's involved in either situation needs to know what your equation is so that they accept you as you are and they accept your behaviors as they come. So there's no confusion or resentment when you're not giving what maybe maybe they thought you would be giving. But as long as you're clear, then nobody can be mad, in my experience. So it's perfectly fine to get to 80% and be comfortable at that position if that's what you want. However, either way, you should be not putting 80% into anything that is not giving you the potential to produce the highest level of return. Whether that's something like folding your laundry, washing dishes, changing oil in your car. Again, if that's not your professional thing, it does not have the potential to produce a high ROI, don't do it. All right, some people call this majoring in minor things. If any of you are familiar with that term, that's what this means. Trying to get that last 20% result from putting in 80% resources, even though the rewards are not commensurate. They don't match up. This is what you don't want to do. So a minor thing is relative to who you are. That's why you need to know what is that area, what's that money area that it really would be worth it to put as much of your resources in it as possible because you know the ROI is crazy. Crazy mean in a good way. And you also need to know what is not that so you know where not to make that bad investment that's going to cost you more than it's going to make you. With all that said, folks, let's recap today's class, which is the other part of the 80-20 rule. So all of you familiar with Pareto's principle, 80% of your results come from 20% of your inputs. So let's understand what this means. Number one, once you have achieved 80% of results with 20% of inputs, that's often good enough. You want to get 100, you got to put in the remaining 80% of your resource in order to get there. This does not apply in every aspect of life. You can't do it in every aspect of life. It's scientifically impossible. Number two, this is usually reserved for people working on their main task, their main work in life, their full-time profession, whatever it is. Here, you can afford to invest 80% of your resources in getting to that last 20% of input. That's not everywhere. So again, you need to know where does it make sense to get that last little nugget of ROI, and you're willing to put as much in as possible in order to get it. Point number three, the mistake happens when we have already achieved 80% of the result, yet we keep working and giving inordinate amounts of resources to get small returns that do not produce rewards. This is the mistake that you don't want to make. This is the bad investment that many people make, also known as majoring in minor things. Make sure that you are clear on your area where the opportunity is highest so you know where to focus and where not to focus so your resources are not being used in an inefficient and ineffective way that can't really do anything for you. It's a mistake that many people make when they haven't gotten the proper clarity on what makes sense or what matters versus what doesn't really matter. And there are things in life that matter. There are things in life that don't. So people say how you do anything is how you do everything. In spirit, I get the point. But if we're breaking it down to the letter of it, then no, it's not how you do anything. It's not how you do everything because not everything is worth the same amount of value. All that said, folks, workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where you work with me directly. That's where you have me as your direct coach. That link's down below in the description. You want to have me as your coach. You want to get access to all of our trainings, all of our courses, all of our programs. Just go to workonyourgameuniversity.com and let's move forward. Work on your game. Dre, all